Our first story comes from Marco Alvarez. Today, Marco is 37 years old and works in automobile insurance. But during the summer after his first year of college, he delivered food for a small restaurant in Laredo. Most of his deliveries were routine. Then, one night, one order sent him to an abandoned house and to someone who was determined to get him through the front door. This is his story. This happened during the summer when I was 19 years old. At the time, I had just completed my first year of community college. I still lived with my parents in Laredo, and I was trying to save enough money to buy a more reliable car. A friend helped me get a job at a small family owned pizza restaurant. During the week, I answered phones, washed dishes, and helped clean the kitchen. On Friday and Saturday nights, I made deliveries. I actually liked delivering food at first. Most customers were friendly. I could listen to music while I drove, and the tips were usually better than what I earned inside the restaurant. This happened on a Saturday near the end of July. The temperature had stayed above 100 degree all afternoon. Even after 10 at night, the air felt heavy and hot. We were preparing to close when the phone rang. My manager, Anna, answered it. I could tell it was a complicated order because she kept asking the caller to repeat the address. After several minutes, she handed me a slip of paper. The delivery was going to a house on the northern edge of town, beyond one of the newer subdivisions. The road eventually narrowed and passed several older properties separated by brush and empty lots. The order included 2 large pizzas, breadsticks, and 4 bottled drinks. It totaled a little more than $40. Cash order, Anna said. Then she added, the customer said his father can't walk very well. You may have to wait for him to reach the door. I looked at the address again. I had never delivered there before. Our normal delivery area didn't extend that far, but it was late and the kitchen had already prepared the food. Anna told me to make the delivery and come straight back. I loaded the order into an insulated red bag and left at approximately 10:45. The drive took almost 20 minutes. As I moved away from the busier part of town, the streetlights became farther apart. New houses gave way to older trailers, fenced lots, and large stretches of undeveloped land. The final road was narrow and badly cracked. I passed the address the first time because the mailbox had fallen sideways into the weeds. When I turned around, I saw the house. My first thought was that I had written down the wrong number. The house looked abandoned. The lawn had grown waist high. Several porch boards were warped, paint peeled from the siding, and one of the side windows was covered with plywood. A dying mesquite tree leaned over the roof. There were no vehicles outside. The only sign that someone might be inside was a yellow porch light burning beside the front door. I parked in the driveway, but instead of pulling all the way towards the house, I stopped near the road with my car facing outward. That was something my father had taught me. Never park in a way that forces you to back out during an emergency. I took the food from the back seat and walked towards the porch. The air smelled like hot dust and dead grass. Insects swarmed around the porch light, striking the glass over with tiny click sounds. As I climbed the steps, I noticed that the front window was covered from the inside. Not with curtains. Someone had taped dark plastic across the glass. I knocked on the door. No one answered. I waited and knocked again. From inside the house, I heard a telephone ring. It rang 4 times and stopped. A few seconds later, my cell phone began vibrating in my pocket. The number was blocked. I answered. Hello? A man whispered, You're at the door. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. I have your order. The door sticks. Push it open. I looked at the doorknob. I'm not allowed to enter the house. My father fell, the man said. I need help getting him up. The way he said it bothered me. There was no panic in his voice. He sounded irritated, as though I was refusing to carry groceries into the kitchen. I asked whether I should call an ambulance. No, his answer came immediately. Then his tone softened. Just push the door. I left your money on the kitchen table. I stepped away from the entrance. I can leave the food on the porch. For several seconds, the caller said nothing. Then I heard him breathing. The drinks will get warm. I looked around the property. Everything beyond the porch light was completely dark. I'll leave everything by the door, I said. The man answered, I can see your car from here. I turned toward the house. There was no visible movement behind the darkened windows. You parked facing the road, he continued. That was smart. I hung up. Every instinct I had was telling me to leave. I placed the pizza bag on the porch and started down the steps. Behind me, the front door creaked open, only a few inches. The interior was dark, but cooler air moved through the opening. It smelled damp and chemical, almost like bleach. The man spoke from somewhere inside. You forgot your money. I don't need it, I continued walking. Something struck the inside of the door. It sounded like a hand hitting the wood. Come back. His voice was no longer weak or polite. I reached my car and grabbed the door handle. That was when I heard another sound from the side of the house. A metal gate squeaked open. Someone was moving through the weeds towards the driveway. I climbed inside and locked the doors. When I turned the key, the engine hesitated. My car had been giving me problems for months, but it had always started on the second attempt. I tried again. The engine turned over but failed to catch. The porch door opened wider. I still couldn't see anyone inside. Then the red delivery bag began sliding across the porch. Someone was pulling it through the doorway while remaining hidden behind the door. The bag disappeared into the house. The front door closed. For a moment, everything became quiet. Then my passenger side door handle lifted. I screamed and turned the key again. The engine started. A man rose from his crouched position beside the passenger door. I never saw his face clearly. He wore dark clothing and something covered the lower half of his face. He struck the passenger window with a metal object, and the glass cracked but didn't break. I shifted into reverse by mistake, nearly backing into a mesquite tree. I corrected myself, accelerated down the driveway, and turned onto the road. Something hit the rear of my car as I pulled away. In the mirror, I saw the man standing near the driveway. He didn't chase me. He simply watched as I drove away. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely keep the car straight. I drove to a gas station several miles away and called the police. 2 deputies met me there. After I explained what happened, they followed me back towards the property. I remained inside one of their vehicles while they searched the house. They found nobody. The rear door was open, and the weeds behind the house had been flattened where someone had run through them. The inside of the house contained almost no furniture. There was no elderly father. There was no indication that anyone had been living there. The kitchen table, however, had been moved into the center of the room. A wooden chair faced the front entrance. On the table were several cash bills, a roll of duct tape, and a length of nylon cord. The deputies also found restaurant menus from several businesses around Laredo. Some of the menus had addresses and employee names written across them. My red delivery bag was on the kitchen floor. The pizza hadn't been touched. A deputy later spoke to the property owner. She lived in San Antonio and said the house had been vacant for almost 4 years. No one had permission to be there. The telephone inside wasn't connected. The call to our restaurant had been made from a prepaid cell phone. Police were unable to identify the person who purchased it. One investigator believed the man had been targeting delivery drivers because they often carry cash and approach unfamiliar homes alone. Whether he intended to rob me or do something worse, no one could say. 2 weeks later, our restaurant received another late-night order. The caller requested a delivery to a different vacant property on the opposite side of town. Anna recognized the similarities and contacted the police. Officers watched the house for several hours, but no one appeared. The caller never tried again. I quit the delivery job the morning after my encounter. My manager offered to move me permanently into the kitchen, but I couldn't even look at the red delivery bag without remembering that door opening. I eventually found another job at an auto parts store. To this day, I don't order food late at night unless I can meet the driver outside beneath a light. I know that most customers are harmless, but I also know how easily a person can place an order, choose an empty house, and wait for a stranger to arrive. It has been almost 18 years, and the man was never identified. Sometimes I wonder how many other drivers he called before me. What frightens me even more is wondering how many came after, and whether all of them remembered to park facing the road. Our second story also begins with a young man alone, but this time, there is no car waiting a few feet away, and no road leading back to safety. Diego Morales considered himself an experienced solo hiker. When the summer heat and the damaged trail forced him to camp overnight near the Devil's River, someone began watching him from beyond the firelight. This is his story. I am 28 years old and live in Eagle Pass. For most of my life, hiking has been the way I deal with stress. I grew up in a crowded home with three brothers. As an adult, I became an emergency room technician, which meant spending long shifts surrounded by alarms, hurried conversations, and people experiencing the worst moments of their lives. Being outdoors gave my mind somewhere quiet to go. I often hiked alone because I could set my own pace. I never considered it reckless. I carried extra water, a map, a first aid kit, a flashlight, and an emergency shelter. I also told my cousin Gabriel exactly where I was going and when I planned to return. The experience I'm about to describe happened 2 summers ago during the first week of August. I planned a day hike across a permitted section of private land near the Devil's River region north of Del Rio. The route was a little over 11 miles. I had completed part of it before, although never during the hottest part of summer. I arrived at the trailhead shortly after 7 in the morning. The temperature was already above 80 degrees. By noon, it passed 100. The first several hours went normally. The landscape was beautiful: limestone ridges, deep ravines, cactus, and long stretches of empty sky. By early afternoon, I reached a section where recent storms had washed loose rocks across the trail. One of the trail markers had broken and fallen downhill. I mistook a dry drainage channel for the trail and followed it for nearly 2 miles before realizing my mistake. When I checked my phone, there was no service. I turned around, but the canyon looked completely different from the opposite direction. Every opening appeared familiar. I chose the wrong one. At approximately 5, I slipped while climbing over loose limestone. My right ankle twisted beneath me. It wasn't broken, but I couldn't put my full weight on it. I still believed I could reach the main trail before dark. Then I noticed how little water remained. I had underestimated the heat and used more than half my supply during the morning. The sun was dropping behind the cliff. I decided that continuing through unfamiliar terrain after dark would be more dangerous than staying in one place. I found a level section beside a limestone wall and prepared to spend the night. My emergency shelter was nothing more than a small tarp and reflective blanks. I tied the tarp between a cedar tree and a rock, gathered dry branches, and built a small fire. I ate an emergency bar and limited myself to several mouthfuls of water. At first, I wasn't frightened. Gabriel knew my route. When I failed to contact him, he would report me missing. My only job was to remain calm and make myself visible in the morning. Darkness arrived quickly inside the ravine. The cliffs blocked most of the sky. Beyond the fire, the brush became a solid black wall. Around 9, I heard someone whistle. It was one short, sharp whistle. I sat up listening. The whistle came again from farther down the ravine. I assumed it was another hiker. "Hello?" I called. No one answered. I took my flashlight and pointed it towards the trail. The beam illuminated rocks and cedar branches, but no person. A few minutes later, a pebble rolled into camp. It stopped beside my boot. The slope above me was too gradual for the stone to have fallen with that much force. Someone had thrown it. I stood and raised my flashlight again. "Who's there?" A man answered from the darkness. "You're off the trail." His voice sounded calm. I felt relieved. "I know," I said. "I hurt my ankle. "Are you with the ranch?" The man didn't answer the question. "You need to come this way." I swept the flashlight across the brush. "Step into the light so I can see you." Silence. Then he said, "Put out your fire." That request immediately made me uncomfortable. Why? People will see it. Who? The man didn't answer. I called out that my cousin knew my location and that searchers would arrive soon. The man laughed quietly. "You're a long way from the location you gave him." I hadn't told him about Gabriel. I hadn't told him that anyone knew my route. I picked up my backpack and moved closer to the limestone wall. "My name is Diego," I said, hoping to keep him talking. "What's yours?" "I know your name." The answer came from behind me. He had moved from one side of the camp to the other without making enough noise for me to notice. My name was written on a luggage tag attached to my backpack. At some point before speaking, he had been close enough to read it. I removed the tag and placed it in my pocket. "Come towards the fire," I said. "If you're trying to help me, let me see you." The man whistled once, then he walked away. I heard his footsteps fade deeper into the ravine. For almost an hour, nothing happened. I convinced myself that he might have been a trespasser or hunter who didn't want his face seen. At around 11, a distant flashlight appeared in the brush. It switched on for several seconds and vanished. A few minutes later, it appeared on the opposite side of camp. The person was circling me. I added more wood to the fire and placed my metal cup on several loose stones near the entrance to my shelter. If someone approached, I hoped they would knock it over. I kept my flashlight in one hand and a small canister of bear spray in the other. Shortly after midnight, the cup fell. I aimed my flashlight towards the sound, and nobody was there. Then my backpack moved. It slid several inches across the ground. A thick, black cord had been looped around one of the straps. The other end disappeared beyond the firelight. The cord pulled tight. Someone was attempting to drag my backpack into the darkness. I grabbed it and cut the cord with my pocket knife. The man laughed from the brush. "Come get the rest of it." I didn't respond. Something struck the tarp above my head. Then another rock landed in the fire, scattering sparks across the ground. "Stop," I shouted. The man answered, "I'm coming in now." The fire was the only thing allowing him to see exactly where I was. It also prevented me from seeing beyond it. I kicked dirt over the flames. The ravine went dark. Almost immediately, I heard footsteps rushing towards the shelter. I crawled behind a shelf of limestone, no more than 20 feet from camp. The opening was narrow, but it gave me enough room to hide between the rock and thick brush. I left my emergency blanket inside the shelter, arranged over my sleeping roll. From a distance, it looked as if someone was lying beneath it. The footsteps entered camp. My metal cup rolled across the rocks. A flashlight moved over the tarp. For the first time, I saw part of the person. He appeared to be a tall man wearing dark clothing and a cap. A cloth covered the lower half of his face. He stood beside the shelter and stared at the shape beneath the emergency blanket. Then he raised one arm. A sharp tearing sound echoed through the ravine. He had slashed the tarp. He pulled the blanket aside and discovered the empty sleeping robe. The man turned slowly, shined his flashlight across the rocks. "I know you're close, Diego." I pressed myself against the limestone. The flashlight beam passed over the entrance to my hiding place, but didn't stop. For the next several minutes, he searched the camp. He opened my backpack, emptied my first aid kit, and crushed one of my water bottles beneath his boot. Then he sat beside the dying fire. He remained there for almost an hour. Sometimes he whispered my name. Other times he made the same short whistle. Eventually, he stood and walked towards the lower end of the ravine. I waited until his light disappeared. I still didn't move. At around 3 a.m, footsteps returned. This time, they came from above my hiding place. Small rocks fell over the ledge and struck my shoulder. The man was standing on top of the limestone shelf. He began moving back and forth, searching for a way down. I crawled deeper beneath the brush. A beam of light appeared through the branches inches from my face. Then, somewhere in the distance, an engine became audible. It sounded like an off-road vehicle moving along the higher trail. The flashlight above me went out, and the man hurried away. The engine faded without entering the ravine, but the stranger didn't return. I stayed hidden until the sky began turning gray. At sunrise, I collected what remained of my equipment. The tarp had been cut open. One strap of my backpack was severed, and my sleeping roll had several deep punctures through it. A hunting knife lay beside the ashes. It wasn't mine. The black cord used to drag my backpack was still on the ground. Fresh boot prints led away from camp and disappeared into the rocky canyon. I followed the ravine downstream rather than trying to retrace my original route. Several hours later, I heard an engine. A ranch vehicle carrying 2 searchers appeared on the trail above the river. Gabriel had reported me missing shortly after midnight, and authorities had begun searching at sunrise. Officers returned to the campsite with me. They collected the knife and cord and photographed the boot prints. The prints did not match any of the searchers or ranch employees. There were no authorized hunters, guides, or other hikers in that section of land. A trail camera about 2 miles from my campsite had captured a photograph shortly before sunset. It showed me walking into the ravine. 38 minutes later, the camera took another photograph. A second person was following the same path. He wore dark clothing and kept his head turned away from the camera. No one was ever identified. Investigators believed he may have been living temporarily somewhere in the canyon, but searches found no permanent campsite. I still hike, but never alone. I also carry a satellite messenger, regardless of how short the trail is supposed to be. People often asked whether I think the man intended to kill me. I don't know, but I remember the way he stood over the emergency blanket before slashing through it. He believed I was underneath. Whatever he wanted from me, it wasn't to help me find the trail. The wilderness itself doesn't frighten me. What frightens me is knowing that some people understand the darkness better than the rest of us, and wait there for someone to become lost. Thank you for listening to tonight's broadcast, A Place for Stories. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, please subscribe and like this video, and let me know in the comments which experience frightened you the most. And if you have a story you would like to share, please email me at tonightsbroadcast77@gmail.com. Until next time, trust your instincts and stay aware of your surroundings. Until the shadows call again, good night.